Welcome to the All the Stuff podcast, where we jam about money, clutter, and food, and the real stuff under this stuff. Join me, Lisa Carpenter, your resident food coach, along with my co-hosts, money coach Jen Turrell and clutter coach Lisa Sharp, as we help you release what's weighing you down and heal your relationship with food, money, and clutter from the inside out.
Welcome to today's episode of All the Stuff. I am Jen Turrell here with my co-hosts Lisa Carpenter and Lisa Sharp. Hi. And today we are going to talk about when life happens. So a step towards getting your stuff organized in terms of your food, your money, or your home, your clutter, is to have a plan and a system, which is awesome. But even the best laid plans are often laid to waste by life happening around us, which is actually happening to me right now, which is why I wanted to do this episode. So all of my plans are totally changing this year. And it's been so interesting because it's thrown me into this place of having to reassess everything myself, which I've decided is great experience for someone who always tries to share personal experiences as potential lessons for other people. Because I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is perfect for people who change jobs, get laid off, all of these things that happen, because I can re-examine my own situation in terms of that right now. But I think this happens in all areas of our life. So I wanted to go around the circle with my co-hosts here and see, how do you guys deal with this in your own life, or how do you help your clients deal with when life happens and totally messes up your plans? How about Lisa Sharp? You want to go first today?
Sure. I love this topic because it's so easy to just get into the, oh, screw it mentality of like, oh, everything's going to hell. Never mind. We're not even going to bother. And, with like personally and with my clients, I see that sort of like, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater sort of mentality. And we're really just hurting ourselves when we do that. So I think the trick is always to stay down, but then get back up and not just use that as an excuse to just sort of dogpile a bunch of stuff on. Because honestly, sometimes just getting knocked down is a huge blessing, because we're just like, human beings just want to keep moving in the direction that we are currently moving in. It doesn't matter how painful, how fabulous, whatever it is, we're just going to keep doing that thing, damn it. So to get, knocked off of that course is sometimes like, that's your opportunity to really reevaluate. Am I actually doing stuff that I want to be doing? Am I in the relationship I want to be in? Am I treating myself the way that I've always wanted to be treated? Am I happy in my body? Am I happy in my business? Those sort of things they're fantastic. So I had personally an experience like that in May. I had a really anxious time over in the spring with my business. I was juggling a lot of stuff. And when you're running your own business, you're wearing all the hats. And I just kept putting more and more and more things on my own plate, doing the whole martyr thing. I can take it. Until my heart started doing all kinds of weird things. And I felt like I had like a mariachi band in my chest. I'm 44, I'm in good health. So I was like, what is this? And it kept getting worse. And it turned out that I was mildly depressed. I definitely had a huge amount of personal anxiety in my life. And I ended up going to the hospital. I realized the depression and the anxiety thing like after the fact, but I ended up going to the ER because I thought I was having a heart attack. I'm happily married. I have 2 kids. I have a thriving business. I have a lovely personal life. I have all these fabulous things going for me. But nonetheless, internally, I was really kind of falling apart. And I didn't really know where to begin, where to even, get moving again. And it really, that has been a major turning point for me. And I'm happy to say that I feel great. And, I've really dealt with a lot of this stuff, not all of it, but, I'm definitely I feel better now than I have in years. And that is a testament to how grateful I am that I really got knocked down, like big time, being strapped to a gurney, going to the ER, zero fun. And all I kept thinking was like, I can't keep doing this to myself because I'm the one that's doing it. Nobody stands over me and says, you have to do all of these things. So having that, that major event happen has been really helpful to me. And I have found that it's brought a new depth to my relationship with my clients. I can help them in ways that sometimes maybe I didn't see before just because I hadn't been through it. And I saw that, the depression was definitely, it had really permeated my life, but it was really subtle. It wasn't this great big face down, I can't get out of bed sort of depression. It was not a major depression, but it was enough of a depression that it really took the joy out of things that I really had found a lot of joy in previously. So sometimes those really big occasions is just a huge blessing. It's a huge, huge blessing. It sucks. It's no fun to go through it. But I think, like with my clients, usually when I'm in somebody else's space, whether I'm working with somebody physically in their home here in Atlanta or via Skype around the world, there's usually there's a linchpin. There's something that has happened that has caused them to pick up the phone, to send me the email, to instigate this relationship. Let's start here. And there's always just this whole current of stuff that's going on that has really made this thing, the thing that they're talking to me about, that's where we're starting. But there's always like this, it's a divorce. It's my mom is sick. My mom has dementia. My kids are leaving the house. I'm about to be empty nest. I want to go back to school. I'm unfulfilled. There's always all this other stuff that is happening. And so I get to help people. I see myself as a shepherd. I help people from point A to point B, or sometimes point A to point Z, moving through this and sort of navigating it through their physical stuff and also just doing the mindset work and the emotional support. But sometimes we have to really just ride that out. And, as Lisa Carpenter is always saying, you just have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's a hard place to be in. It's a really hard place to be in, but it's so beneficial.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
Yeah, me 100%. So you guys have heard me say before that I believe that life is always happening for us, not to us, right? Because that's just what I believe. So even the crappy things, they really are, like Lisa Sharp said, they're gifts for us. And with the work that I do with my clients, especially, a lot of them are working around weight loss and changing their relationship with food in their body. It's one thing to be making that a priority and have it be an important part of self-care when life is going smoothly. But it's when, the caca hits the fan, so to speak, that you really find out, is this important to me? Have I really made the changes that I need to make to support me? And like I said, because it's easy to do it when everything's good, and it's not so easy. You haven't made your self-care a priority in your life. When everything goes sideways, so is your self-care, which then makes you feel worse. So just like Lisa, the biggest turning points have been in my life have been when I've lost all control of stuff, right? Like when my hubby went off to rehab, that was a huge turning point for me where I had to come face to face with my role in my life and in my relationship. He's got his own story. He's been in recovery for a number of years now. But it was really a time, so speaking from a self-care angle and how I treat my body, how I treat food, I didn't suddenly just start binging on junk food to soothe away all the emotions. I actually let myself be with the discomfort of the sadness and the anger and the frustration and the confusion, all of those emotions that were coming up for me. I also made a commitment to myself that I wouldn't drink at all during it. And it had nothing to do with the rehab aspect of it. But I knew that I didn't want to be that woman that came home, put her feet up every night and had a glass of wine to take the edge off. I knew that I needed to be the biggest support of myself. And that meant that I had to do my physical work. So I still went to the gym. I still took care of myself. However, I turned down the volume on that because exercise is still a stressor in your body. And I was under high levels of stress. I made sure that I was still eating well. So it wasn't perfect. Like, of course, there's room for other things to come in. Just like every other human being, there's an element of emotional eating that I am with as well.
but I did make sure that I had good food in the house all the time, because the food you put into your body supports your emotional state. I also made sure that I was paying attention to, my spiritual practice, which at the time wasn't huge, but simple things like I would leave work and I would come home and I would have a bath in the middle of the day, which sounds like so luxurious, but I needed to get grounded. And I was trying to run a very thriving business at the time and take care of all these other pieces. So life is always going to happen. Life is always going to happen. So it's really about deciding how you're going to dance with it, how you're going to show up for yourself in those moments. So Jen, you better tell us what's going on with you.
Right? Okay, sure. Well, for my part right now, this past year has been a really, really difficult year. My husband and I have been running our family's ranch for over 13 years. And this year has been the worst year that we've had. I mean, kind of cumulatively, the last 2 years have been really hard. And I've found myself, because it's been our mainstay, and when we first started doing it, was before we had kids. We had all these plans like, oh my gosh, this would be an amazing place to raise kids. Like, I always wanted horses when I was a kid. We can have horses for our kids. They can have ponies. We'll be out in nature. We'll do all these things. So we had all these plans that didn't really work with having kids with special needs. They needed to be in town. They needed therapies. A lot of things that are safe and fun for other kids are a lot more dangerous for my kids, with having very little sense of self-preservation and danger. So my attention over the last 10 years has been really distracted from the ranch. And, the beginning of that was with the crash in 2008 to 2010 was a difficult time. That was when my kids were little. We were trying to figure out what was going on, diagnoses, all these stuff. But the ranch has been what we've held on to. So even when times were bad, I found myself just like desperately trying to make it work. And this spring, slightly before you had your health issue, Lisa Sharp, I found myself between coming back from England in March, I think it was March 17th, and the beginning of May, I lost 28 pounds, which is a lot in a very short amount of time, mainly because the stress got so high that I was not taking very good care of myself. And my weak spot has always been my stomach. During pregnancy, I had hyperemesis, which is the extreme form of morning sickness, where it just continues all day long and through the entire pregnancy. And I vomit easily. I get nauseous easily. Anxiety hits me right in the stomach. And I found myself just kind of on that, what do they call it? The Bratz diet. I was eating like bananas, applesauce, and what are the other two? Toast and rice or something. Yeah, even though I wasn't physically ill in terms of having like an infection or something, the stress was getting to me enough. I also I'll admit I am on antidepressants. I have been for a few years because of difficulty with sleep is one of the main things. My kids have sleep disorders, and so does my husband. So we're all kind of have that extra stressor at different times. And I went on the antidepressant mainly in the hopes that it would help me sleep and kind of just even out things a bit more. And in March, when we were on our trip, our luggage was lost, and I had packed my antidepressants, so I accidentally cold turkeyed off them, and then spiraled right into this really anxious time where it seemed like everything that could possibly go, like each time something went wrong, I was like, okay, well, things have to get better now. Like, okay, we have this toxic weed on our ranch called loco weed. All the ranches around us are getting it. We've never lost so many calves and so many cows in one short period of time to this weed that they eat, and it's all over. It's pervasive. It's impossible to spray for it, and especially because we have been working towards organic status, which we may not be. Well, at this point, the decision has been that we're actually going to leave the ranch, and it's been an interesting one, and it's not as bad as some people who leave family farms or ranches because it is being turned into a nonprofit. It's going to be protected, but our role is coming to an end with it, and that's been really interesting because it has been our main source of regularly recurring, ongoing income. We do have other businesses. We have our record label that my husband runs. We have my business as well, but my kids have pretty extreme expenses with all of their special needs stuff. We do more therapies than are considered medically necessary to insurance. So I'm going back to the basics and figuring out, okay, what does it cost to run our life? What's our absolute bare minimum that we have to spend every month? What is it to maintain our lifestyle, including all of the extra therapies and activities that we do for my kids? And what new income streams can we create as we transition out of this thing we've been doing for almost 14 years? That's a long time to have a business and leave it. So that's our big thing right now. The funny thing is, though, once we made the decision, once it was proposed to us, and our first reaction was, this is the worst thing that could ever happen. Lose our regular income. Like, how could we possibly accept this? But the funny thing was, the morning before we got the call about it, my husband actually came out in the morning. He was leaving for work. He'd hardly slept at all. He had a terrible night. And he was like, we need to figure out, we can't keep living this way. It was kind of like what you're saying, Lisa. We can't keep living this way. It's so stressful. It's so hard. And we're kind of killing ourselves. I had one trip to the ER 2 years ago when I thought I was having a heart attack. That was kind of when things were really difficult with my kids. And my husband had a time when he thought he was having an aneurysm. He had a headache for almost a year, and then it got acute and he lost some hearing. I do find these happen in caregiving families sometimes. At first, when the issue is acute, when the diagnosis happens, everyone comes and offers help and is supportive, but that's when you're not ready to accept it, because you're like, no, this is my child or my husband, my wife. I can do everything for them. 5-10 years later, you've been doing all of these things, having interrupted sleep, having, your own health issues accumulate over time. But all the help isn't as immediately there anymore because everyone's gotten used to you having these issues. I mean, there was one point I remember with my illness, my vomiting, which was not an actual illness, of telling my husband I thought I did have stomach flu. And he goes, you always vomit. Like, he was not prepared to give me the illness sympathy, because it's something that's happened so often in our marriage over time. I had 2 pregnancies of vomiting multiple times every day, and then stressful times I get sick too. So, it's become a normal thing. It's become part of our reality, but it shouldn't be. I mean, that was what I initially went to Lisa Carpenter for, was I vomit. And I did have this endoscopy. I had acute inflammation. You started working with me on getting the inflammatory foods out of my diet, which helped. But I realized this April, when all of this started really becoming acute in terms of stress, I went right back to my old habits of food. I really was not taking care of myself. I was not eating well. And I wasn't eating enough to sustain the energy I needed to get through my days. And I found myself going back to bed, which is not something I usually do, like getting the kids off to school and being like, you know what, I'm canceling things and I'm going to go lie down. I'm going to take a NyQuil and I'm going to go back to bed. And honestly, it was some, depression as well. But I think it's good for us to talk about these moments in our lives too, because I do feel like sometimes from the outside, Lisa Carpenter, you've talked about this on my podcast too, from the outside, when I was watching your launches, and, I think that anyone looking at the 3 of us from the outside could see that we have clients, we have successful businesses, we make money, these things are going on. And it's not always easy to see that there are times where we're getting rushed to the hospital from stress. It seems like a heart attack or me drastically losing weight when I really shouldn't be, because of stress, because my stomach can't handle it.
So that's why I'm so passionate about the work I do with women, because self-care is non-negotiable. And it's like I said, we can't just self-care ourselves when everything's rosy. It's how are you willing to show up for yourself when things aren't rosy? And are you willing to still say, I need to make myself a priority? So I would recommend to anybody who's listening is write out a list of all the things that you need to do for you to feel your best. From, taking naps, listening to music, going for a walk in nature, the food you eat, the company you keep. Because when things go crappy, you're able to look at that list and say, what do I need to do for me today? Because we have to take responsibility for how we want to feel in our lives. We get to decide how we're going to react when things happen and how we're going to care for ourselves through that process. And unfortunately, for every single one of us in this room, it took something happening to us for us to realize, holy crap, I don't even know what I like. I don't know how to take care of myself. Like, this is not okay. And that changed the face of my business. It changed how I work with my clients. And it's something that I think that we've all become incredibly passionate about, is how can we support other women to not get to that place first before they realize how important it is. Is there anything that you guys want to comment on before we wrap this episode?
Well, I think the list that you just mentioned is a great place to start too. And I do think that when you come up against something that does throw all your plans off, taking some time to stop. I mean, my husband and I took a weekend when we found out that we could potentially sell out our equity and walk away from this. And we went from, this is the worst possible thing that could happen, to by Monday, my husband had 2 nights of sleep. We track our sleep that were the best sleep we had in ages. Like, we didn't realize, I mean, we still have a lot to figure out about it, but it was that moment, Lisa, where you're talking about, actually, this is kind of a huge gift. Like, I felt like all the things that went wrong over the past 2 years were kind of like beating my hands off this thing that I was clenching to, or like the cliff edge of me being like, no, I can't let go of this. Oh, and then they step on another finger, and then they step on another finger. Totally. And finally, by the time this opportunity came up, we were ready to consider it, and then to finally be like, you know what? This hasn't been working that well for our family. It's made it really hard. Like right now, we just got my daughter her first appointment in this new aerodigestive clinic, where we may have to go and spend several weeks at a time outside of our city in another city. And that's really hard. In the past, it's been hard for my husband to ever leave the ranch. It's hard enough for me, and then it's hard for me to manage the 2 kids in a separate city by myself, going to hospital appointments, you know. So just looking at it this may give us some breathing room during a really important time for one of my daughters, and it possibly make everything better. Like, we both kind of started working on creative projects that we'd abandoned for a long time. Like, my husband's doing new music. I started working on my novel again. I found an ending to it. And it is a novel about ranch life, a family in ranch life. Like, oh, I could never figure out how to end the story, and now I know.
Now you have an ending.
Yeah. So I think at the beginning of these experiences, it can seem like everything going wrong is so horrible and you won't find a way out of it. But sometimes, actually often, I feel like so many people's books that they write about their life is coming to a crisis point, and then life getting so much better afterwards. So look for the silver lining, be prepared for it, be prepared for the disaster to bring good into your life in some way. That's something I wanted to add. Anything else, Lisa Sharp?
You know, I do. I think we really psych ourselves out, thinking like that thing, whatever that thing is that we are so terrified of, is going to be the worst thing that ever happens to us. And we don't even look at it because we're so busy trying to make something else work, going down that same path. By God, we will figure this out. And sometimes we just can't. Sometimes the answer is to just let go. And I have found that one of the most helpful techniques that I use when it really feels like the shit is hitting the fan is to just sort of step back and look at it and go through the process of like, what is the worst thing that could happen? And then how would I deal with that thing? Again, it's like getting back to what I was saying in an earlier episode, I think, about, you know, just giving yourself that space to actually come up with your own answers. And because we do really have them. So it's like, okay, so what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, you know, I could go bankrupt. Oh my God, that would be really embarrassing and really, you know, horrible and whatever. And then I'd get over it. And then, you know, and then what do you do? Well, then I would start rebuilding my credit, or I would look for another job, or I would get the divorce, and it would be painful and awful, and it would be really hard with the kids for a while. And then I would figure it out. You know, it's not, everything is fixable except for dying. You can't undo that. But just about everything else you really can. And so sometimes you just have to force yourself to go mentally into that dark place and poke around in it and see what happens and shine a light back there, because that unknowing, it's not like we're avoiding it, and we are not paying attention to it consciously, but unconsciously it's always there. You can't sleep. It's making you throw up. It's making you feel like you're about to have a heart attack.
And those things will kill you, but the other thing won't. The original thing won't. The stress gives you the heart attack. That's what kills you. That's,
Yeah. And I mean, I am right there with all of us. We all do this. So this is, it's not like all of a sudden I have rainbows in my life, but I have, I think there's a certain strength that comes from looking at the thing, acknowledging the thing, and then moving through the thing, when all of a sudden then you get that perspective of like, oh my God, I can't believe how much time, effort, energy, bandwidth I put into X, because, I really wanted it to work, but it turned out that wasn't even the best thing. But those are just life lessons. There's no here nor there, good or bad about any of that stuff, but just giving yourself the space to mentally go there and being okay. And you can always reach out to us.
I know. It's called the breakdown before the breakthrough.
Absolutely.
And you always it's messy. It's messy. Embrace the mess, people. Embrace the mess.
I think that's a good way to end the episode. So thank you so much for joining us. If you liked the episode, please subscribe, rate, and review, and join us in our free Facebook group, which we'll put a link to. Also, if you're interested in working with any one of us on our stuff, we all have programs that we can link to. Right now, I have my Mastering Money Matters Mastermind group that you can join. I know Lisa